Every one-on-one meeting with my former boss, Jeremy, began with the same four words. He'd say, Linda, tell me a story. And he used that to kind of get us to practice what we do for a living. And that was we communicated value through storytelling for a customer. And so today I'm going to tell you a story about two people who taught me what executive presence looks like and what it sounds like and what happens when it's missing. My name is Linda Sanchez, and through my experience in the military and in tech sales, I've seen how communication shapes trust and credibility. So I'm going to compare two former colleagues at DocuSign, Jeremy and Andrew, by examining their verbal and nonverbal behaviors, how others responded to those behaviors, and what that taught me about developing an executive presence. So let's talk about Jeremy. Jeremy was my regional vice president at DocuSign. He led 10 AEs, account executives, on our team. And together we managed thousands of commercial accounts. He had recently been promoted from enterprise sales and had worked at um, several prominent tech companies in his past. And this gave him a lot of credibility within our team because a lot of us felt like he had succeeded in roles that many of us really hope to achieve one day. Jeremy's style, when it comes to his personality, was very aligned with the red personality in Dr. Taylor Hartman's People Code. He was direct, he was assertive, very task-oriented, but he understood how his intensity affected others and he adapted when necessary. His first executive presence behavior was communicating clearly during uncertainty. We got a new CEO, and the CEO implemented 3 rounds of layoffs. And as you can imagine, during all of this, there was probably a lot of organizational change and organizational guidance that created challenges for our team. And Jeremy found all of this out at the same time that we all did. And what he did is he quickly explained what had changed in broad terms and down to our level and what we would do next. June Medaya identifies clarity and conciseness and credibility and confidence as essential traits for executive presence. And I think that during that time, Jeremy demonstrated them by turning such a confusing time and change into an actionable plan and guidance. He also balanced his directness with humor. We were the only team out of 8 that held daily stand-up, and he checked in with us frequently, so he was very involved, and he would joke about how closely he managed us. And through this, we were able to kind of interpret his involvement as commitment rather than micromanagement. And I think that Matt Norman describes behavioral agility as the ability to shift between directing, coaching, listening, and advising. And Jeremy's humor helped him adapt his naturally intense style to the team. And that really helped us navigate things like inorganizational change and a few rifts. His second behavior was intentional nonverbal communication. In meetings, he always sat upright, he made eye contact, he listened pretty closely. He also adapted his appearance to the audience. For instance, internally, he wore t-shirts and hats, which is pretty common in tech sales. But this made him pretty approachable for us. For customer meetings, though, he removed the hat and he presented himself more formally. Nicole Lipkin argues that leaders need to read the culture, read the room, and read the people. Carol Goman adds that adjusting our appearance and behavior is not inauthentic. It allows us to present the most appropriate version of ourselves. And I think that Jeremy's decisiveness communicated competence, while his humor and attentiveness communicated warmth. And people responded to him with respect and openness. And because he adapted to his audience without losing that sense of authenticity. And now let's move on to Andrew, right? I think that Andrew displays no executive presence. He was my peer on my team at DocuSign, and we interacted usually just on virtual calls on these stand-ups that Jeremy had us attend, and his style was more aligned with the white personality in Hartman's People Code. He was reserved, he was calm, and he was much less verbally expressive, which isn't necessarily negative, but when it came, to expectations of a sales environment, it didn't quite, he didn't quite adapt. The first behavior that distracted from his executive presence was how he presented himself when discussing important deals. He usually came with his camera off. When his camera was on, it was dirty, and he was disheveled, and it looked like he had just woken up. Now, I can't speak to his actual work effort, but these behaviors created an impression that he was unprepared or disengaged. Medallia explains that confidence is communicated through vocal volume and posture and eye focus and appearance. And Andrew's quiet delivery and limited visibility weakened the confidence and credibility of his message. And when it comes to Lipkin's argument to read the room, it was usually a miss for Andrew. In a sales culture, you know, energy is valued and confidence over your deals is necessary, and he didn't do that. He didn't emit confidence. And the second behavior involved how he spoke about others. During a conversation I had with Andrew, he criticized another team member while that team member wasn't there. And this immediately reduced my trust in him because it made me wonder whether he might speak about me in that same way. Medaya would say that his connection and credibility as a professional was weakened and lowered his executive presence. And so people responded to Andrew with limited engagement. When he discussed deals or requested internal information, team members were slow to answer, or sometimes they didn't respond. And I don't know everyone's motivations, but his presentation and communication style may have made colleagues less inclined to engage with him. Andrew's example taught me that intentions alone aren't enough. Vocal confidence, visible preparation, and how we speak about others all influence whether people perceive us as competent and trustworthy. And so my biggest takeaway from these two peers is that executive presence is not simply something we have. It's something we communicate in every interaction. So from Jeremy, I learned to provide clarity during uncertainty in a business setting. I saw what listening with intention looked like, but most of all, I saw a good representation of adapting your style to the audience without losing your authenticity. From Andrew, I learned that quiet delivery, appearing unprepared, and speaking negatively about others can undermine confidence and trust, regardless of what message you're trying to get across. So moving forward, I want to be more deliberate about how my verbal and nonverbal behaviors affect people around me. Jeremy always asked me to tell him a story. Ultimately, our executive presence tells a story before we ever explain who we are. So the question is whether our behaviors are telling the story we intend.